Good afternoon, Mayor Johnson, members of the city leadership, superintendent of police, law enforcement professionals, and community stakeholders. Thank you for the opportunity to present the findings of my research regarding Chicago's firearm-related homicide challenge. As a criminal justice consultant with Sherlock and Holmes Incorporated, I was tasked with analyzing violent crime trends over the past 5 years and developing evidence-based recommendations designed to reduce firearm-related homicides while improving public safety. During my research, one conclusion became immediately clear. Chicago's firearm-related homicide challenge cannot be explained by a single cause, and it will not be solved by a single solution. Instead, meaningful progress requires targeted law enforcement, strategic partnerships, accountability for violent offenders, and long-term violence prevention initiatives. My research found that Chicago continues to face one of the nation's most significant firearm-related homicide challenges. However, violence is not evenly distributed throughout the city. Instead, shootings are concentrated within relatively small geographic areas and among a relatively small number of repeat violent offenders. Illegal firearm trafficking, gang conflicts, retaliatory violence, drug activity, and neighborhood instability all contribute to this challenge. Because the problem is concentrated, the response should also be targeted. One of the strongest themes throughout my research was that law-abiding firearm owners are not driving Chicago's homicide problem. Instead, violent crime is primarily committed by individuals who illegally possess firearms or repeatedly engage in violent criminal activity. As someone whose family operates in a federally licensed firearm business, I understand the extensive federal regulations and compliance requirements already placed on licensed firearm dealers. The experience reinforces what the research demonstrates. Our resources should focus on violent offenders, illegal firearm trafficking networks, and repeat criminal behavior, not on responsible firearm owners who follow the law. To better understand this issue, I applied 3 theories. Social disorganization theory, which explains how neighborhoods experiencing long-term instability and weakened community structures become more vulnerable to crime. Routine activity theory, which demonstrates that violent crime occurs when motivated offenders encounter opportunities without effective guardianship. And finally, deterrence theory, which emphasizes that crime decreases when offenders believe that they will be caught and held accountable. Together, these theories reinforce the importance of combining proactive policing with long-term prevention. Based upon my research, my strongest recommendation is expanding focused deterrence. Research constantly demonstrates that a relatively small percentage of offenders commit a large percent of serious violent crimes. Law enforcement resources should prioritize those individuals. I also recommend expanding intelligence-led policing, increasing firearm tracing, strengthening partnerships with the ATF and the FBI, and improving homicide investigations. These strategies target the individuals responsible for violence rather than broadly applying resources where they are less effective. I'd also like to briefly discuss one of Chicago's newest public safety initiatives. In June of 2026, the city established the Office of Gun Violence Reduction. On July 29th, Mayor Brandon Johnson also signed an executive order creating additional procurement standards for firearm vendors seeking city contracts. I believe the objective behind these initiatives to reduce illegal firearm trafficking and improve public safety is an important one. However, based on my research, I question whether this particular policy will significantly reduce firearm-related homicides. The overwhelming majority of firearms used in violent crimes are not obtained through lawful commercial transactions with vendors seeking city contracts. Instead, they are commonly associated with illegal trafficking, straw purchases, theft, or criminal networks. Because of that, I believe greater public safety gains will come from expanding investigations into illegal firearm trafficking organizations, increasing homicide clearance rates, improving firearm tracing, and focusing enforcement on repeat violent offenders. Although I strongly support proactive law enforcement, effective policing alone cannot solve every aspect of firearm violence. In Chapter 12 of Violence, the Enduring Problem, this reminds us that lasting violence prevention requires strong community partnerships. Investing in youth mentorships, workforce development, educational opportunities, the trauma-informed services help reduce future violence by addressing underlying risk factors. These programs should complete law enforcement, not replace it. Should complement, sorry. These programs should complement law enforcement, not replace it. My recommendations are organized using the SARA problem-solving model. First, identify where violence is occurring. Next, analyze why it is occurring. Then implement targeted responses. Finally, continually assess outcomes and adjust strategies based upon measurable results. Evidence-based policing requires continuous evaluation rather than relying on assumptions. In closing, Chicago's firearm-related homicide challenge is complex, but it is not impossible to address. The evidence demonstrates that meaningful reduction in firearm-related homicides require accountability, targeted enforcement against violent offenders, disruption of illegal firearm trafficking, and long-term investment in prevention. Chicago has already taken important steps towards reducing violence. My recommendation is that future efforts continue focusing resources where research demonstrates they will have the greatest impact. Ultimately, successful public safety depends upon cooperation among law enforcement, community organizations, elected officials, and residents. Together, these efforts can create safer neighborhoods while protecting the rights of responsible citizens and holding violent offenders accountable. Thank you for your time. I welcome any questions regarding my findings and recommendations.